Good morning. We're gonna get started with today's activities. Actually, we already had our reflective study from 10 to 10:55 with Victor. So I'm actually continuing the work today. We're gonna start with a text from the book Living Spring. It's text number 90, called Courageously. Courageously. Well, I guess I need my glasses. Courageously. Be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Act courageously. Be strong. Paul, in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 16, verse 13. Be on your guard in the daily struggle. Stand firm in the faith when faced with the storm. Act courageously in every difficult situation. Be strong in suffering in order to receive its lesson of light. Still today, Paul's advice to the Corinthians is clothed with surprising appropriateness. In order for us to receive the substantial qualities of redemption, we must have the courage of those who trust in the Lord and in themselves. A flood of unreasonable tears is worthless before a wrong that has been committed. It is our duty to repent of any evil we may have done, but to continuously feel sorry about it is wasting our time in redeeming it. Of course, deliberate evil is a crime. However, a thoughtless wrong is a valuable lesson as long as we incline ourselves to the Lord's designs. Without moral resistance in the storm of purifying conflicts, even the noblest hearts fall apart. Therefore, we cannot rest in our endeavor of spiritual growth. Of course, we will stumble many times. Of course, we will get scratched by thorns along the way. Our situation will be regrettable. However, whenever we demand a soft bandage of undue consolations, thus halting our journey to the Almighty. Christians are not students that allow themselves undeserved rest. Disciples of a master who served whoever needed him until his final testimony on the cross, they must work at sowing and harvesting the infinite good, being on their guard, helping and acting courageously. Let us do our initial prayer. I invite everyone who is watching us online to close their eyes. Take a deep breath. Beloved Father, beloved Master Jesus, we are here today looking for our Master's enlightenment, looking at his words and example. We are here today analyzing, studying, investigating the words and the actions of Jesus in order for us to understand how to better follow his example, how to better learn from his words, for us to learn how to soften our hearts that may have been hardened throughout time. We are here to finally say yes. We are here to open our hearts, not just to the teachings, but to the love that Jesus gave and still gives us. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be here. We thank you for this technology that allows us to spread the word of love, to spread the word of our Master, even if we can't be here in person. We ask you, we ask our mentors of this house to enlighten us, to give us intuition, to help guide us, so that today's content may touch our hearts somehow, may give us courage, as Paul said, to change, give us courage to take a little step forward or a big step. May we all benefit from the contents that we see here today. So be it. Thank you, Eric. All right. So, new month. Oh, I don't need this anymore. New month, no virtue. So last month we were celebrating FSS 5th anniversary, and the virtue was, of course, fraternity. For this month of July, so today is the first talk of the month, and for this month of July, the virtue we're going to be working on is meekness. Therefore, the picture of the lion and the lamb. And we're going to try and have We're going to try and have a better understanding of what meekness is. And also, we're going to answer the question if meekness is an innate virtue. Something innate is something that we are born with, something that just comes in the package, let's say. So are people born meek, or can we become meek? So first, let's reflect on three simple questions. The first, what is meekness? And we're going to talk about it in the next slide. Is meekness a passive virtue? And I know there are probably some Brazilians watching, and if you don't know the translation, meekness is mansidão. So, is meekness, mansidão, a passive virtue? In order to be meek, do we need to be passive? And how can I develop this virtue? So this question kind of answers the question we asked, if it's an innate virtue or if we can become meek. So let's see how it works. Let's see what is meekness, if it's passive, and how we can develop meekness. Because yes, we can do it. So going to the dictionary, and this is from dictionary.com online. I went and looked for the definition of the word meek or manso. So it's an adjective, like a quality of a person. And more meek or mais manso is meeker. And the one who is the most meek is meekest. So I've got three definitions for the word. The first one, humbly patient or docile, as under provocation from others. So you're provoked and you stay humbly patient and docile. Second definition, overly submissive or compliant. Compliant is when you follow a rule, when you comply with a rule or a law or what anybody tells you to do. Spiritless, tame. And the third is an obsolete definition, meaning not used anymore, gentle or kind. So these three definitions that we see here, so humbly patient or docile when under provocation, overly submissive or compliant, spiritless, which we can also say coward, tame. Tame is, in Portuguese it would also be the word manso, but it's, for example, when you train a wild horse or a wild animal, we say that you're taming that animal. You're turning it from being a rebel into being tame or meek, calm, and do everything you tell the animal to do. So, for example, those people who train lions or tigers or whatever for circuses, they are called tiger tamers, lion tamers, because they break, let's say, the rebelness out of that animal. And then we have the third one, gentle and kind. However, this definition is considered to be obsolete. It's not used anymore. Now, when we think of who was the personification of all virtues, of course, the answer is Jesus. Now, was Jesus overly submissive? Because the definition says overly submissive. Was Jesus overly compliant? Was Jesus spiritless? Was Jesus a coward? And of course, the answer is no. Unfortunately, with COVID, I don't have anybody here to help me answer the question, so I have to answer them myself. But I'm guessing everybody is answering the same thing at home or wherever you're watching. So, even though this is the definition that is mostly used today, which is actually a negative trait, it's not seen as a virtue, because when it says overly submissive, spiritless, it is looking down on someone. So nowadays, to call someone meek in general is to call them a coward. It's to call them weak. In English, there's this kind of rhyme that some religions use, which is fairly useful, and it's very good actually to use with kids and teens. And it says that meekness is not weakness. So it rhymes, but it's a good way to tell people that even though the dictionary and most people consider obsolete to use meek as gentle or kind, it is the true meaning of the word. And it is with this meaning that Jesus used the word when he said that blessed are the meek, for they shall or they will inherit the earth. So he wasn't talking about cowards or anybody spiritless. He was talking about gentle and kind spirits incarnated. They will inherit the earth. So, again, in general, in society, and it's the same thing in I can't speak for the whole world, but I can speak for where I live and where I used to live in Brazil. Unfortunately, this seems to be what people think when you say somebody is meek, is that they are a coward, they're weak, they are spiritless, they have no courage to speak up, they won't fight for what they believe. Now, let's see a couple examples when Jesus showed very, very clearly his meekness. And the first example is in the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verses 22 and 23. Before we see the verses, let's just try to understand the situation. So, John chapter 18 is the chapter that describes when Jesus was arrested and what came afterwards. So, verses 22 and 23 happen after Jesus was arrested and after Peter denied him. And so, Jesus, and this happens after he's arrested, Peter denies him. He is dragged, he's taken to the temple, and the high priest starts to question him. And the high priest asks him, where are his disciples? What are his teachings? And then Jesus says, well, I've been preaching in the synagogues. I've been preaching in the open. I've never hid anything. I've never said anything that was secret. And he says, why are you asking me? So many people listened to me. So many people heard me. So everybody knows what I've been saying. And at this moment, that's when this passage happens. So when Jesus says this, that he hadn't been hiding anything, he was speaking in public, and the high priest could ask anybody who had listened to him. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. So the official was defending, let's say, the pride of the high priest. And then Jesus says to the official, to the soldier, if I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? So this is a situation where Jesus showed meekness. And as we go along, we have quite a bit of text today because there's a lot from the Gospel according to Spiritism. So as we move along today, we're going to understand better what meekness is, what gentle and kind means. But here, Jesus shows very clearly his meekness. So even though he was slapped in the face, he didn't stay quiet, because again, that's the notion most people have of meekness. Even if you're provoked, you just lower your head, you don't say a thing. That is being overly passive. However, Jesus immediately questioned the official. So, if I said something wrong, tell me what was wrong. And if what I said is not wrong, why did you strike me? Why did you hit me? So Jesus did not return the slap, but he wasn't quiet either. He asked the official a question, like all the questions Jesus asked were reflective questions, so it was for the official to reflect on his actions and he should get to the conclusion himself. Why did he strike Jesus? It was just to save the pride of the high priest. So there wasn't a legitimate reason other than the high priest's pride. So here's an example where Jesus shows meekness very clearly. So he did not return the violence. He did not pay evil with evil. However, he wasn't quiet either. He questioned the official in order for the official to reflect on his actions. And then another example in Matthew chapter 5, verse 39. And I always like to repeat, I keep repeating myself, that Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 are about the Sermon on the Mount. And what the Sermon on the Mount is basically Jesus explaining to us, humanity, how to live. Is Jesus explaining how to interpret things like love your enemies, things like all the Beatitudes, which in Portuguese is as bem-aventuranças. So blessed are the meek who shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the poor or humble in spirit. Blessed are those who cry, for they will be consoled. So all of this is in chapter 5, 6, and 7. So the whole sermon explaining to us how to live, how to lead our lives, how to develop virtues, is in those 3 chapters in Matthew. So chapter 5, verse 39, Jesus says, "But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So this is a very, very famous verse. If somebody hits your cheek, turn the other one. Now, if we think about the previous one, if you think about when Jesus was questioning the official again, in this case, did Jesus turn the other cheek? So when Jesus says turn the other cheek, does he mean this literally? Like he was literally slapped, he was literally stricken on his face. Did he turn the other cheek and tell the official to hit him again? No, he didn't. What he did was to pay the evil that was done to him, the slap, the strike, with goodness. And that goodness was the reflective question he asked the official. He didn't return the violence. He paid the violence with a question that, if the official reflects on it, is actually a piece of advice, right? So think before you strike someone. And so many times Jesus taught us the real meaning of meekness. These are just two examples. But Jesus was the personification of love, indulgence, and serenity. Like, he wasn't fazed by any of these things. He wasn't fazed while he was on the cross. So, and he was very peaceful, but he was never passive. And here is what we need to understand. Being meek is being peaceful, not passive. Being passive is having absolutely no reaction. It's not that Jesus didn't have a reaction, he did, but his reactions were all peaceful. Every time he was challenged by the Pharisee or anybody else in the temple or anywhere he was preaching, every time he was challenged by a question that was aimed at, catching him saying something that would be against the Jewish law, he never lost composure. He never got angry. He was always peaceful, but he never left a question without an answer. Most of the time it wasn't the answer they wanted, but he never left a question without answer. So now we're going to see a little bit of a text from a book psychographed by Chico Xavier and written by Emmanuel. And it's called Escritos de Luz, and it talks about meekness. So Emmanuel says, when Jesus proclaimed happiness to the meek at heart, he certainly didn't mean to promote idleness. Idleness is doing nothing. Hesitation and weakness. So Jesus was not saying, shut up, be quiet in your corner, that's it. That's not what Jesus was saying. The Master wished to highlight well-balanced souls, understanding men and people of goodwill who, understanding the value of time, know how to sow goodness and wait for the harvest without desperation and without violence, which is exactly what Jesus did during his 3 years of postulate. He sowed the seeds to wait for the harvest. He was not desperate. He was never violent. He showed us time and time again what all the virtues, including meekness and humbleness or humility, are. So in Matthew chapter 2, verses 21 and 22, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" So here we're talking about one of the worst crimes, right? We're talking about murder. So murder definitely deserves to be analyzed, to be, let's say, repaired, right? It's a huge error. It's a huge mistake to make. So murders will be subject to judgment. I think we can all agree that it completely makes sense. However, if we think of a scale 0 to 100, murder being 100, there are other things in between. And that's what Jesus talks about in the next verse. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, when we think murder, one of the most serious crimes there are. So understandable. But Jesus says that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment as well. So it might not be the 100, but it is somewhere in that scale. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Haka," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. So haka is an expression they had at that time, and it was usually people would say haka and they would spit to show how much they despise someone, how much someone angers or irritates or annoys them. So anybody who has that attitude with someone else will also answer to the court. So anybody who has that annoyance, so anybody who says, "You fool," and here he's not talking about, "Oh, silly." He's talking about anybody who gets annoyed with someone else because their pride has been hurt or something. Again, we can go back to the situation with the official. That's the official's attitude was saying, "You fool," to Jesus. How dare you talk back to the high priest? So this is what Jesus is talking about here. So again, it's the whole scale. It's very easy for us to think that only the 100 is important, only the 100 is going to be judged. But there's a whole scale there that we need to work. Sometimes we think that because we are not at the 100, we're fine, we're good, we don't have to do anything else. That's not the case. So now we go to the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 9, and I recommend reading the whole chapter. Chapter 9 is, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there are several chapters that actually talk about the Beatitudes, when Jesus says, "Blessed are," and chapter 9 is the one that talks about, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." It's not a very long chapter, but it has so much content. I just got like a few pieces here and there because there's way too much in there. I actually had almost double the slides I have here now, but I had to be more selective. However, again, I highly advise everybody to read chapter 9, "Blessed are the meek." So let's look at a few things from that chapter. So item number 4 says, "By these maxims, Jesus makes meekness, moderation," and maxims, they're talking about the Beatitudes. When Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth," by this maxim, Jesus meekness, moderation, docility, affability, and patience, the law. Consequently, condemning violence, anger, and all discourteous expressions towards others. It therefore becomes evident that here, as in all circumstances, the intention aggravates or lessens the offense. But why should a simple word become something so grave as to warrant severe reproof? Reproof is when you don't approve of something. So why is why is somebody's intention, what could somebody's intention make it worse, like aggravate it or lessen the offense? We have the same saying in Portuguese and in English, it's the intention that counts. And that couldn't be any truer. It sounds like a cliche, but it's 100% true. It is the intention that counts. And why should this be so negative? Why can't it be approved in any way, shape, or form? And this really touched me. This is because every offensive word expresses a sentiment that is contrary to the laws of love and charity, which preside or rule over all human relationships, and between them maintain cordiality and union. We always talk about the major law of love, justice, and charity, or love, charity, and justice in whatever order. And this explanation is logical, obvious, but it made me think. Because I keep telling my kids, be careful what you say, because once you've said it, it's in the wind, it's out there, and you can't swallow it back. Even if we say, I take it back, we can't take back what we said. And this is a very, very clear explanation. Every offensive word expresses a sentiment. So every time we say the word, with that word that we say, there's a sentiment, there's a feeling, there's an energy that goes with that word. And if it's offensive, it's contrary to the laws of love and charity. So sometimes we tend to think that only our actions should be according to the divine laws. But our words too, words are very, very powerful. And again, always thinking before we speak is for everybody's benefit, right? Then continuing, same chapter, chapter 9, and now we are already in the instructions of the spirits. And the instructions of the spirits in this chapter is way longer than the first part with the verses from the gospel. And this is something that Lazarus says. Benevolence towards one's fellow creatures, which is the result of loving your neighbor, manifests itself in the form of affability and mildness. So benevolence, being good, manifests with affability and mildness. However, it is not always a good thing to trust in appearance. Education and worldliness can give men a thin veneer of these qualities. Veneer is like a layer. There are many whose feigned or false good nature is nothing more than an exterior mask, like beautiful clothes hiding interior deformities. This says a lot. This says a whole lot, right? So education in terms of culture, let's say, can give us the appearance of being good, of having a good nature. But many times it's just a mask that hides our moral ugliness, not physical, but moral ugliness underneath the mask. And then Lazarus still says, the world is full of such people with a smile on their lips, but poison in their hearts. Who are mild as long as nothing irritates them, but who bite at the least provocation. How many times have we heard, or have we even said, I'm very good natured, I'm a good person, I'm peaceful, I'm calm, I don't fight with anybody, if you don't step on my toes. I'm a wonderful person if you don't provoke me. If you provoke me, you will see what's going to happen. So this is exactly what Lazarus is talking about. This is exactly the mask he's talking about. So we are apparently good-natured. But if anybody irritates us, then we need to show them that they're not allowed to do that to us. That how dare they? Who do they think they are to do that to us? Those whose tongues are made of gold when speaking face to face, but change into a poison dart when speaking from behind. So, again, a lot of food for thought. Is what we say to people face to face the same thing we say about them when they can't hear us? So again, food for thought. And this is also true not just for words, but there are also those cases of people who outside the home seem to be good-natured, have the mask of a good and peaceful person, but inside their own homes, they're tyrants to their families. So it's the same category, right? So again, world education will give you the appearance of being good. So outside, we act the way we are expected to act, or we act in a way to be liked by others, but that's not our true nature. The deformity, the moral ugliness is hidden behind the mask. And when we get home, it's those at home who will suffer this moral ugliness, who will have to go through that. So, still in the Gospel according to Spiritism, still that chapter, still Lazarus, he says, the doctrine of Jesus constantly teaches obedience and resignation, two virtues which are the companions of mildness and activity. So here we are answering if it's, again, because we have already talked about it, but here again, Lazarus says activity, not passiveness. Although man wrongly confuses them with denial of sentiment, so obedience is denial of sentiment. Let's understand this. So a lot of people misunderstand, thinking that being obedient means swallowing your feelings. Even if you're angry, so here I think it's easier to use an analogy with a child, or even a boss and employee relationship. Even if your feelings go against it, you have to do what you're told. Just because somebody told you to do it, so you have to do it. So some people confuse obedience with denying your own feelings, just swallowing the anger, like many times, just like holding it inside of you. And if we think about adults, many times that's what happens when an adult has to swallow their anger. They are going to bring it back home, and their family suffers the anger, right? They can't take it on their bosses, so they take it on their families. So denial of sentiment, obedience as denial of sentiment, like shut up and do it. And denial of free will. So some people think that resignation is denying your free will. It's just accepting something and having the idea or the feeling that you accept it because there's nothing you can do about it, right? So you are being denied your free will. You have to do it, and that's it. But then Lazarus explains all the misconceptions. He explains that obedience is the consent or the approval of reason, and resignation is the consent of the heart. Both are active forces, since they carry the burden which has fallen upon them due to foolish revolt. So let's understand. Obedience is the consent of reason. So obeying, and here let's not speak about people, let's talk about the divine laws. So understanding a divine law, for example, of responsibility, is the consent of reason. So we obey, we comply, we follow because we reason it, because we understand that even if we feel like we want to do something else, because they say the denial of sentiment, so even if we feel like we want to do something else, we still do the right thing, because in our minds, in our conscience, we know that that's the right thing to do. Because there's a difference between instinct and reasoning. So sometimes when you are hit, you want to hit back. And here is where obedience is the consent of reason. Even though you might want to hit back, your conscience tells you that that would be breaking the law of love, justice, and charity. Therefore, obeying those laws, and also the law of cause and effect, we choose not to do it. So we obey the law because we know it's better for us. And resignation is the consent of the heart. So resignation is accepting, not because we don't have free will, not because we can't do different. We can. However, resigning to that is a sign that we feel in our hearts that that's the right thing to do. Our conscience tells us to obey, and we resign ourselves to it. We actually obey because we feel it's the right thing to do. And again, both are active forces. And just the examples I gave show why they're active. Because many times we want to do differently. However, we reason, we follow our conscience, we resign ourselves, and feel that we're doing the right thing. So it's very active. It's not passive at all, because it takes an effort for us to do it. It doesn't come automatically. And the fact that it doesn't come automatically actually answers the question in the title of the talk. Is it an innate virtue, or can we become meek? We can definitely become meek. But when we ask, is meekness an innate virtue? It can be. When that spirit has been developing that virtue throughout several lives, throughout several existences. So in this life, without our memories of past lives, it may look to us that that person was born meek, that person was born humble, that person was born honest, that person was born serene, calm. But God doesn't play favorites. God's fair to everybody. Anybody who appears to be like that from birth, it's the result of the efforts that were made previously. So can it be innate? Yes, it can for this incarnation, but because it has been developed before. So people who are meek or meeker, a little more meek than we are right now, it's not because they received the gift. It was not given to them. They have already made the efforts they have already done the work that maybe we are still about to do. Now, Henneman, still in chapter 9, and instructions from the spirits, Henneman says something that is a big help to help us change our mindset and get started on the pathway to change, to self-change. Not changing someone else because we can't, but to self-change. Because of the false idea that it's not possible for a person to reform their own nature, how many times have we heard or have we said, I am the way I am, love me or hate me? So it is a false idea that it's not possible for a person to reform or to change their own nature. They judge themselves exempt, free from even trying to correct their defects. So I am the way I am, love me or hate me. So I'm giving an excuse not to change. Because I can't change. I was born like this, I am like this, that's it. This applies especially to those defects or faults in which the person willingly takes pleasure, or those which would take a great deal of perseverance to eradicate, to eliminate. This is why, for example, an individual who is prone to anger, who gets angry easily, almost always finds excuses for his temperament. So it's not that I am an irritable person. It's not that I get angry easily. Somebody is angering me. The driver who cut in front of me made me angry. The person who didn't do what I asked them to do made me angry. The weather makes me angry. It's very easy to place the blame or the guilt outside of us. That's what Henneman is saying. And then he continues. Man only remains bound by vices because he so desires. That's a strong one. Those who really wish to liberate themselves can always achieve this end, can always succeed. If it were not so, then the law of progress would not be able to exist. So what is he saying? What he's saying is the law of progress would make no sense if people could not change themselves. If I can't change myself, it doesn't make sense for the law of progress to exist. The law of progress exists because I can change myself. However, we don't always want to change ourselves. Because like Lazarus said before, it takes a lot of work. It's not easy to change ourselves. And here, Henneman talks about eradicating. So he says, the person willingly takes pleasure. Like, I like to get angry. Or those who could take a great deal of perseverance to eradicate. So when he talks about eradicate, when he talks about eliminating, this is not something that is going to happen overnight. That is not something that we're going to say, it's not like starting a diet on Monday. It's not something we're going to say from today on or tomorrow on, because that's how many of us are, right? So today it's my goodbyes, today is my farewell to all the foods that I like. I'll start dieting tomorrow, which coincidentally is a Monday. Not how it goes when we are talking about eliminating vices or bad tendencies. We don't eliminate them overnight. We start to lessen them. We start to make them weaker, smaller, less frequent. And it's a long process. Any overnight change is not a real change. How many existences, how many incarnations have we been, let's say, feeding, nourishing the same bad habits, the same bad tendencies or inclinations? It's not going to be overnight. It is an effort. It takes a lot of effort to work towards it. And especially for meekness and humbleness, which walk completely hand in hand, in order to be meek, in order to not pay violence with violence, not pay anger with anger, we really need a great deal of humility, of humbleness. And these are two virtues that we develop together, little by little. It's not one thing like you have to have one before you have the other. They go hand in hand, and we develop them together, situation by situation, opportunity by opportunity. Every time we have the opportunity to practice them, it's a little step forward, a little step forward. Now, let's talk about how we can get rid of the vices, again, not overnight, but how can we start to lessen them? How can we start, little by little, to liberate ourselves? There are people who rejoice, who enjoy being angry. There are people who think their normal state is being angry. But in general, anger is not a good feeling. In general, anger is not a state we want to be in. So how do we start to liberate, to free ourselves from these negative feelings that are bad for our physical health as well? We're gonna talk about one way to help us, and it's important to understand that every time we try to bend or break, bend is like just fold, or break the divine laws, there's a conflict. And this is where I have that feeling that I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be anxious, I don't want to be aggressive, and so on. So that's a conflict, because we are breaking a divine law. So in the back of our minds, our conscience is going beep, 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 red light, red alert. And if we break the law of love and charity, we may get angry, we may get annoyed, we may get irritated. So in order to free ourselves from this conflict, we need to work on our self-knowledge, on self-awareness, self-conscience. Again, I can't begin to fix something that I don't know is happening. So first thing we need is self-awareness, right? So the first thing we need is to realize, understand, notice, perceive that we are getting angry, that we are getting irritated or annoyed. So first thing, we need to realize. Second thing, we need to conceive the virtue. So first we realize the problem. I'm getting angry, I'm getting annoyed. Then we conceive. And here conceive is literal, is give birth, produce, come up with the virtue. So meekness, serenity, humility. So produce in ourselves that virtue. Again, I realize I'm getting annoyed, and then I am going to make the conscientious choice of not hitting back, of not calling names back, of not being vengeful, not searching for revenge against someone who irritated or annoyed me. And then finally, become meek. For example, calm, serene. So this is an exercise to help us develop virtues. Like I said, it's not easy. It's not overnight. So first we need to realize there is a problem. Then, conscientiously, we are going to choose not to feed that negative feeling, not to feed the anger, not to feed the anxiety. Then, as time goes by, I will become meek. I will become serene. The B on the top takes a while to get there. And it's not on the first or second try that we're going to get there. But it's an exercise that will take us there. So there's no magic. We do not change just by wishing so. Any sudden change is not real and only creates a pseudo virtue, not a real one, the mask. We need to make continuous, patient, perseverant, and disciplined efforts. So can I become meek? Yes. Can I become serene? Yes. Can I become peaceful, humble? Yes. But it takes work. First we realize it's there, we notice, then we conscientiously choose the best path. So we obey and resign ourselves through reason and feeling. Eventually, we're going to be meek. We're going to develop that virtue. It's not overnight, it's little by little, but it's a work we can do. Okay, let me see if there are any comments. Sorry, I'm not the best with technology here, but Eric says, I truly believe that there is a mistake in our comprehension among the difference between resignation and to resign of something. Thank you, Eric. Yes. So resign from something is when we give it up. Thank you very much, Eric. That's very pertinent. So resign from something is when we give something up. We lose the energy, we choose not to do it. Resignation is acceptance of something that either we cannot change or we choose not to act on. Because again, obedience, because our reason, because we know that that's not the best for us. Resignation is another virtue that is extremely active because it is completely based on our options, our conscientious options, but it's a very active virtue and an extremely important virtue because that's how we learn to be humble, to be meek. Thank you very much, Eric. And, okay, so let me check Facebook. Okay. Oh, it's not letting me. Sorry. Oh, here, I'll try again. Oh, yay, finally I got there. All right. Okay, on Facebook, Eric says, we might have good intention, but sometimes it could be directed toward a cliff, like falling off a cliff. That is why discernment is so important to reason. Exactly. So again, the obedience based on reason. So we don't make bad choices. Right, and Malcolm says, beautiful sentiment. We cannot change others, we can only change ourselves. Exactly. And by changing ourselves, we can become examples. Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you for listening. Well, 12 on the dot, so we're going to go a couple minutes over just for the final prayer. So, Eric, if you could help me with the music. We are going to do our final prayer. And again, I invite everybody to close your eyes, to raise our thoughts to God, our loving Father. Father, we thank you for the beautiful day that we have outside. We thank you for the passing seasons that remind us that there is a time to sow and there is a time to harvest. We thank you for the rain that comes for the good and the bad, for the just and the unjust. We thank you for the opportunities that you give all of us to improve, to better ourselves and be examples. Dear mentors of our house, we are very thankful for your support, for the intuition you give us. We're very thankful that you help us persevere and keep working. Please, Lord, bless, protect, and enlighten all of our brothers and sisters, our families, our city, this country, the whole planet. Please cover us with your love, with your light, and help us understand opportunities that look like problems, but are actually blessings. Opportunities that will lead us to betterment, that will lead us to start feeling what we already know and to turn that feeling into action. May we all have a blessed week. May we all be able to enjoy our families. And may we all be able to recognize everyone around us as brothers and sisters in humanity and deserving of our peace, deserving of our affection. So be it. Thank you very much. Have a great Sunday.